The NBA trade deadline is right around the corner, and with a few deals already taking place and many more rumored to be happening before Thursday's deadline, we'll be looking at what's happened so far and how some of the rumored deals could impact Miami's chances of advancing to the NBA Finals. It's another trade deadline primer here on Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com, use the promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. So somewhere around mid-Tuesday, I'm looking at my phone as I want to do, and somehow it seemed like we had gone into some kind of a time loop or something like that. Jumped ahead 48 hours to mid-Thursday because all of a sudden a flurry of potential deals start happening, and one actual deal takes place between the Indiana Pacers and Sacramento Kings. And so, a lot of excitement around the NBA, a lot of excitement from our listeners and watchers. So what we're going to do today is cover some of the trades that have happened. We're going to look at some of the trades that are rumored to be included with Miami, as far as potentially getting a player like PJ Washington, Rui Hachimura, maybe even Nick Batum. And we'll also look ahead to a potential trade in Brooklyn that could definitely impact Miami's chances of advancing to the NBA Finals. But let's start off with the deals that have already taken place. We talked a little bit about a deal to the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple of days ago with Caris LeVert. Do you want to start off with that, or you want to start off with the big trade? Yeah, all right, let's go with the Cavs trade.
Yeah, because, we talked about it a couple days ago, but now that there's been more context, you see some of these other guards that have been moved across the league. And I just wonder what it is that the Cavaliers thought that they were doing. I'm on record as saying that I'm really not worried about the Cavaliers as far as a playoff team this year. I think in a 7-game series that it's a fun lineup. I really enjoy watching Cleveland this year. Evan Mobley is rookie of the year, and it's not close. And it's looking like he probably should have been the top overall pick. But they're building something great in Cleveland. Credit to them. No disrespect to them. But they're young, and it's still a little gimmicky what they're doing. And I think in a 7-game series, it could be exploited. What they did need, though, was another ball handler next to Darius Garland, especially when Colin Sexton was injured, and then, doubled down on that. Ricky Rubio is out for the year. They ended up moving Rubio's contract and some picks to go get Caris LeVert. And look, Caris LeVert's a fine player, but he's a volume shooter. He's an okay ball handler. He's an okay passer. I don't really know how many shots he's going to get in Cleveland. Do you stagger him and Garland, whatever? I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But they basically traded Rubio's contract, a lottery-protected first this coming summer, and then a pair of second-rounders for LeVert. And you look at what these other guys went for, like Norman Powell going for basically pennies, right? Other deals across for other guards. You saw what what they had to give up for CJ McCollum. Look, I don't know what, obviously you're not in one of these front offices, so you don't really know the extent of the dialogue and how much of this stuff was really on the table for them. You look at a guy like Eric Gordon, who is still out there, who plays for the Rockets. I think, look, I understand that Caris LeVert is younger than Norman Powell, much younger than Eric Gordon. But to me, like those guys, especially CJ McCollum, like all those guys would have been way better fits for Cleveland. Like you could say younger, contract this, whatever. Those players are way better than Caris LeVert. And probably always will be. I'm not high on Caris LeVert overall.
No,
but
I agree with you. Before we even jump into the Sacramento Indiana trade, I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm glad that we brought it up now because we did hint at it before. But the LeVert trade, first let's start with the Cavaliers assessment. So many people worried about them, right? Because they've got these tall lineups and things of that sort. Jared Allen playing like an almost all-star, right? He was right there in the conversation, if not for LaMelo Ball. I think they're a good team. They're a fun team, but I think we're kind of over-evaluating them a little bit because they've exceeded expectations so completely. They were supposed to be a lottery team. They weren't going anywhere. Kevin Love was going to get traded for pennies on the dollar earlier this year because, they didn't need a veteran. Yeah, exactly. Or bought out because they didn't need them. They didn't know what they had on them. That it's all tied together, to me, seems really flimsy. Like I can't bet on them being a playoff contender. And I think we kind of, look, young players constantly falter in the playoffs. They're not sure what to do. The adjustments that are made in a series. Playoff basketball is not regular season basketball. Every year we see a fun, exciting regular season team and go, oh, this team's going to make noise in the playoffs. And invariably it never happens. So
Yeah.
I think we start there. The Cavs probably are not as dangerous as they look. They're great. They're fun. Like you said, they're good during this regular season. I don't know that it makes much of a difference. And yet the Caris LeVert trade. Go ahead.
No, I wonder if it's a break for the Heat too, because I know we haven't seen any of this stuff play out, but it feels like if you could have gotten CJ McCollum, if you're Cleveland, because ultimately Portland only did that deal for draft capital. That's what they did it for, draft capital and flexibility. And if you offered that Rubio deal contract with the other expiring contracts and those same picks that you gave up for Caris LeVert, I don't know. Portland has to at least think about it. I wonder if that was even a conversation.
That would have been more dangerous to me, right? I mean, obviously,
I think Cavs fans would be like, "Well, McCollum's too old; he doesn't fit our window." You know who would be really great to kind of help coach these young guards in Cleveland? CJ McCollum. Who, if you talk to young guards in the NBA, they talk about CJ McCollum like he's Dwayne Wade, and I don't mean that to be
really
like hyperbole. Like they love CJ McCollum. Like they idolize his game because it's old school, mid range, the footwork, the stuff, all of it real, all of it deserved. People love CJ McCollum. He's a good dude, great locker room presence. I thought that would have been perfect in Cleveland, just as sort of a veteran presence to help these guys. But instead, they're doubling down youth. Whatever. I think the Cavs kind of screwed it up here. If I'm going to play
Miami dodges a bullet, yeah, for sure.
Maybe, yeah, in the future. Not like this year. I don't think it would have mattered either way. But in the future, maybe. I don't know. To play devil's advocate against my own argument, LeVert, I guess, theoretically can slide down to the 3. He's bigger than all those other guys that we were talking about. So if you were trying to stay big, but still, it's like that's not enough of a selling point to me.
They're excited.
When somebody,
I know
Eric
Cavs
Gordon
fans are excited.
CJ McCollum could have been.
If you're a Cavs fan or even a Cavs media person and you're looking at this team and what they've been over the last couple of seasons, any move seems like a great one. It's like, oh man, they believe, they're all in, they're buyers and not sellers.
That's a fair thing to say, but
maybe
they bought too soon and they bought the wrong thing.
Right.
Can we talk about the other trade? The Pacers
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So then today, on a Tuesday morning, we find out that the Indiana Pacers have finally broken up the duo of Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner, keeping Turner, sending Sabonis to the Sacramento Kings in exchange for what? Tyrese Halliburton as a central piece of that?
And Buddy Hield.
That's right.
Yeah. Sacramento traded all of their shooting away.
Their best package.
They're building ostensibly around De'Aaron Fox, and what you need around De'Aaron Fox is shooters, and now Sabonis. And they traded their only shooters away for a non-shooter. Sabonis is good. He's a 2-time All-Star.
Yeah.
He's a good rebounder, a good passer. He's good. Is he one of the best 20, 25 players in the NBA? I don't think he's that. No. I am very confused by this trade, to say the least. I think the world of Tyrese Halliburton. I've talked to a lot of people around Tyrese Halliburton. I did it 2 years ago in the lead up to that draft when I was covering the Warriors. And I was doing my own scouting reports on Halliburton. And people love him. And I was saying that they should trade. The Warriors should draft Halliburton over Wiseman, and I look to be right at this point because Halliburton's awesome and he has top 25 potential, unlike Sabonis right now, who kind of is what he is. I think this was an absolute fleecing by the Pacers. I don't know that they were going to trade Sabonis, but as soon as Halliburton was on the table, plus Buddy Hield and some other things here, they were like, "Yeah, for sure, we'll do this." Now we get to kind of reset, but get a guy who we can. You're not building a team around Tyrese Halliburton, but he could be a really good, like high-level starter for you. And the pairing between him and Brogdon, now you have 2 really big, long guards who are really good three-point shooters, really good passers, really willing defenders with the length and the athleticism to do it on that end. That's something now that you could build around. Now you have Miles Turner at the center role, and he's freed up a little bit. Like I think the Pacers actually almost get better, despite getting right now a worse player in Halliburton than Sabonis, but a player who has a much higher ceiling in Halliburton. And I'll tell you this, David, the executives that I talked to were shocked. I texted some people; they were shocked that they got Halliburton for Sabonis. Like,
no, I think it's a good deal.
Surprise in the NBA.
I think it's a good deal for Indiana. I just also don't think it's necessarily an impactful one this season. Like right now, they are 7 games back of a play-in seed. They're in 13th in the Eastern Conference. That are 19-36, not likely to make any kind of
They're
significant
not getting into the playoffs.
moves into standing. Yeah, they're probably not getting. This is a move for the future. The Heat don't even have the Pacers on the schedule for the rest of the season. So, in terms of how it impacts Miami, not very much this season. Next year, I'd say the Pacers get significantly better. Maybe still somewhat mediocre. Look, the Indiana Pacers, not ever too low of a floor, never too high of a ceiling. This kind of gets them back in there. They've cleared that separation. I think, everybody kind of saw the writing on the wall that Sabonis and Turner just weren't going to work together as a duo. And I think they made the right choice, personally. And I think you probably agree with me that Turner is the best fit for what you want to build in Indiana. So,
yeah, and
Indiana,
if you're going to trade one, you're going to get much more in return for Sabonis, obviously, than you would have for Turner. And I actually think that this is a really smart move by Indiana because it's not a complete reset. Not that you needed one because you already kind of stink this year. But it's sort of a soft reset. You trade your two-time All-Star for a guy who has All-Star potential in Halliburton. But also, if you have a little lottery luck, you can end up with like a Banchero type from Duke or one of these top prospects with a little lottery luck, and all of a sudden you have one of the top prospects in this upcoming draft. Halliburton, who's one of the best young players in the NBA. Malcolm Brogdon, who's a good point guard for you to get kind of keep
if
things
he's healthy.
We'll see if they hang on to Buddy Hield, but he's one of the more prolific three-point shooters in the NBA, but they could still deal him somewhere else. And you still have Miles Turner, to your point, who's a good shot-blocking center who can make threes for you, and you can do stuff with him. Like, all of a sudden, the Pacers, with one fell swoop, kind of mastered this soft reset, and I don't know. I don't know what the timeline for them becomes as far as a team, but they're always kind of one of these teams that just seem competitive, other than this year. But as far as I can remember, they've always just sort of been in that playoff mix.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that's 16 seasons or something like that they've been in the playoffs. I think they've been a long time. Them and Portland, I think, were kind of two teams that were similarly built, always in the playoff race. And unfortunately for them, both of them out of the playoff race this year. But this is a move that Miami fans can worry about a year, maybe two down the road. When Miami is starting to deal with Jimmy aging and the glut of Kyle's contract and whether or not Bam has take the leap that everybody worries about so much, what they do with Tyler Herro if he becomes an all-star in the next 2 seasons. If Miami's on their trajectory downward or the next couple seasons, it could happen. We don't know. We're not predicting anything here. And Indiana's on their way up. Then that's when you start to worry about these kinds of moves. Right now, not impactful. Even if they somehow were able to get into the play-in tournament, which seems very, very unlikely given the rest of their schedule, they're not going to compete against Miami. I just don't
One more interesting note on this: Tyrese Halliburton and Tyler Herro competed on the same AAU team briefly.
All right.
Herro ended up moving from that AAU team to go to a bigger one. Halliburton stayed with that initial AAU team. But if we ever get to the point where we end up with Heat Pacers finals 2012 style again, maybe Herro and Halliburton would be in that. That might be a storyline we might hit down the road at some point, a few years down the road.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on CJ McCollum to New Orleans? Because I think it's a fine trade for the Pelicans. But again, they're waiting on Zion Williamson. They've got too much up in the air. Brandon Ingram, a fine player. He's not getting traded anytime soon. Having said all that, it's a good deal. I mean, McCollum's a good player.
Talk about duos that you're like weird to see break up. I thought McCollum and Damian Lillard would just retire together. It just felt like we were going like if they were going to break up that duo, I felt like it was going to be like 3 years ago. But they never did it until just now. They're doing a massive rebuild around Damian Lillard. We'll see if that works out. You want to talk about implications with Miami? I don't know anything. But if they're obviously getting cap space, they have a huge trade exception that they can use, which could take another player out of the Eastern Conference, maybe like a Julius Randle type or something like that, and send him to Portland. And then it depends on, hey, we just rebuilt this whole new thing around you, Damian Lillard. Do you like it? Look what we did for you. Do you like it? And if Damian Lillard's like, nah, I don't like this, then maybe something happens this summer with Lillard. But the Portland Trailblazers are a fascinating. They're doing an offseason style rebuild on the fly,
mid-season,
2 days ahead of the trade deadline. I mean, it's pretty nuts, and it's something that every fan of every team, well, not every team, not if you're the Kings, I guess, but if you're a New York fan, a Miami fan, any of these fans who want to maybe get into the Damian Lillard thing, if that were to ever happen, it's worth monitoring.
Yeah, no doubt. They're also rumored to be in a potential trade with the Detroit Pistons for Jeremy Grant, so we have to continue to monitor that. Nothing finalized as of yet, but something that might play out. So at least that gets Grant away from the Eastern Conference to another potential contender here. So that's
Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, I know. But at the same time, Dame getting roasted a little bit, just a bone to pick there. He's getting roasted a little bit with the talk about the grind and everything else. He doesn't shy away from the grind. And now all of a sudden he's got this team to rebuild there. Like, he wasn't going to play this season. It was kind of a lost season for Portland anyway. I wonder if they'll wind up keeping Chauncey Billups and firing him, because first of all, I don't think Billups is a particularly good coach. But maybe, I wonder, does Lillard want to stay in Portland now, go through another active rebuild like this as a central piece? It seems like they're going to need to build something around him in the short term.
Yeah, it can't be a rebuild, right? Like, all these draft assets that they have, that they've acquired now, they've acquired some, very clearly meant to go get another player. They're not going to use these draft picks on rookies. They're going to go try to go get another player. And one thing that's worth noting, they now have the cap space to potentially go get a star this summer if they keep on this track. So we'll see.
So we'll talk about some potential trades being linked to the Miami Heat. But first, just a reminder that this show is sponsored by PrizePicks. Are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and we know you will too. It's easy to use. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under in their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe, and they offer fast withdrawals. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store or Google Play. PrizePicks offers a variety of options. They offer any prop you can think of, from point scores to rebounds, even steals. PrizePicks also allows mixed sports entries, and they don't just offer the NBA. They also offer options on college basketball, college football, the NFL, the Major League Baseball, soccer, MMA, and so much more. And for a limited time only, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. But you must use the code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use the code NBA. You get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entries scores a single point.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. The NBA trade deadline is Thursday, and the Locked On NBA podcast will be covering it live from 2 to 4 p.m. Join Kim Becker, John Corrales, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to get analysis of every blockbuster move. Subscribe to the Locked On NBA YouTube channel and turn your notifications on so then you know when they go live. Also, subscribe to the Locked On Heat YouTube channel and tune into our show right after the Locked On NBA show at 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We'll have live reaction to the trade deadline. Whether or not the Miami Heat make a move or not, there will be plenty for us to talk about, which is very obvious considering that we're 2 days away. We already have tons of things to talk about. But we should discuss some of the rumors lately that among the players that the Heat are rumored to be interested in. And our friend Greg Sylvander over at 5 Reasons Sports reporting that the Heat are interested, targeting potentially Charlotte Hornets power forward PJ Washington among an assortment of other players. Now, PJ Washington was the name that was most interesting out of the list. And look, I haven't done any digging on the PJ Washington thing in particular, but as far as his contract, it makes sense. And it's in line with what you and I have been talking about all along. When you look, everybody wants to talk about the Duncan Robinson trade. Right. That was always going to be a far-fetched idea. A much more likely scenario for Miami ahead of this deadline was packaging Markieff Morris and a smaller contract, whether it be KZ Okpala or Omer Yurtseven, and kind of putting $4.4 million together and maybe taking those two guys, moving it to another team, getting somebody who can contribute right away back in return, and then promoting Caleb Martin into what would be then the 14th roster spot, right? And you just kind of leave that 15th spot open or potentially leave it open for a buyout guy. But so PJ Washington's contract fits in that sort of $4.4 million contract spot. So what do you think about PJ Washington?
Well, he's got a team option for next season too, so that's great. I guess Miami could ultimately wind up, choosing not to pick up that option and keeping some salary cap space there. Although I mean, aside from Yurtseven, none of those players really have any time left on their contract anyway. But as far as Washington, the player, he's fine. Like, he's a name because he was a lottery pick. Played at Kentucky. Obviously, there's a connection to Miami there. Limited athleticism from what I've seen. Okay shooting, although I would say that he probably takes some difficult shots that don't need to be taken. So I wonder if he's just a player in need of a change of scenery. And look, we've seen that before. It's hard to gauge a player's value or impact just based on 3 seasons in Charlotte, of all places, where they've been losing and they've gone through such turmoil in terms of their coaching staff and everything else and players. And, how do you evaluate what PJ Washington can do based on what he's done on a bad team? And so there is potential there. I'm just not particularly high on that potential. I think he can do some things, but he's not a passer. He's just an immediate upgrade for this season. And if that's the case, that's fine. But only because you just don't believe that Markieff Morris is ever going to play in for the Heat this season.
Right. And for the record, it's worth noting that the Heat were interested in PJ Washington in lead up to that 2019 draft. They worked him out a couple different times, and they were interested in him. We don't know if they would have taken him. He went off the board 1 pick before them to Charlotte. They ended up, of course, with Tyler Herro, and I would say that probably worked out. But they liked PJ Washington back then, and I would imagine they probably still do. He's a 38% three-point shooter. He's not particularly great from the corners, but that's not on a very high volume either. The other thing with PJ is that he is extension eligible this summer. So this would not be a 1-year rental. This would not be a situation where you decline the team option there. I mean, this is a guy who you would trade for, understanding that you would pick him. You would extend him. Now, I don't know what that extension looks like. It's probably not a huge extension, but it's something that you would do to retain him, I would imagine. Do the Heat like PJ Washington that much? Would they have to get him in-house to determine that? Probably, right? Yeah. But they probably like him enough to at least look at it. And again, we don't know what the extent of any if there had even been a conversation. Look, the way that this stuff works is a GM will call another GM and say, "Hey, who do you like on my roster? Here's who I like on your roster." And maybe that's the end of the conversation. Very rarely do you actually get let's do this for this, and then you plug it into the trade machine and it works. Like, you very rarely get that in the NBA. But for it to actually work out, it would be Markieff Morris and probably Omer Yurtseven, because you got to think, if you're Charlotte, why would you trade PJ Washington, a guy who 3 years ago you took in the lottery, who's been okay for you? He's been useful. He's played some 4, played some 5 for you. He's versatile. He fills gaps for you. He's not a hopeless player by any stretch. Why would you trade a nice young player in PJ Washington? Well, number one, maybe you don't want to pay the extension this summer. That's a factor. And also because you're looking for a center, and you've made it known to everybody that you're looking for a center. And Omer Yurtseven plays the center position, and he's been really impressive in the small amount of minutes that he's had. And if you kind of look at what they need a guy like Yurtseven. He can kind of stretch the floor. He can rebound a bunch. He's a presence in the paint, at least. He's young, so he fits their timeline. There's things to like there. He's a Georgetown guy. That's close to Charlotte. That probably doesn't matter, but I don't know. I thought it was worth pointing out. So it would be Markieff Morris and Omer Yurtseven for PJ Washington. So then the question goes back to Miami. After everything you've seen from Omer Yurtseven, and we love some Omer Yurtseven, would you be willing to trade Omer Yurtseven in a package to get PJ Washington? We put it on the Twitter poll over on Locked On Heat on Twitter. 68% of you said yes. 32% of you said no. So overwhelmingly, a majority of you said yeah.
I will say 100% of the front office will do the trade in a heartbeat if they like Washington more.
Yeah, I think it would make sense. The only problem with it, though, doesn't exactly line up contract-wise, like perfectly. Miami is so close to the luxury tax line, $400,000, that this deal would put them at $262,000 below that tax line. So you're still not paying the tax. But the problem becomes you're doing a 2-for-1 deal. You only got 13 players under contract. You need 14 by league rules. So you would have to promote Caleb Martin, would probably be the first move. You would have to promote Caleb Martin on a minimum contract. It would be prorated, but it wouldn't be prorated enough to keep you out of the luxury tax. So you would be doing this deal and guaranteeing that you would be entering the luxury tax if you did this deal by itself. You could do potentially a second deal, but you couldn't do a second deal to just offload, for example, KZ Okpala, because now you're only with 12 players. And even if you promoted Caleb Martin, you're only at 13, and you still have to go sign somebody else to get to 14, and now you have the same problem. So this doesn't quite mathematically make sense unless you deal a higher salary for a much lesser salary. Maybe it's Duncan Robinson's 15.6 for somebody who makes 13 or 14 or something easier like that. But again, are you jumping through all these hoops for PJ Washington? I don't think so. As much as maybe the Heat like PJ Washington, I'm sure they don't like him that much unless they think that that subsequent deal also improves the team. So it's a little tricky here.
Do you like him that much?
No. I like PJ Washington. I like his versatility. I think the Heat need to find a guy like PJ Washington.
Right.
We've been wondering whether or not Markieff Morris was going to play all season. We have no idea. And when he does come back, we don't know what he's going to look like. They need somebody in that backup 4 role. And I don't think that you could rely on. If you can find a guy who could be healthy and play for you right now with giving and not having to jump through all these hoops, I think you do it. And
right.
with PJ, the math doesn't quite work.
Here's a theoretical. Going through all those cap gymnastics to get a player like Washington, who you probably can't sign long-term because of conflicts with the rest of the contracts on this roster, and knowing that he is, okay as a player and fits what they're trying to do now, but you still need a 4. Would he be worth the sacrifice and the cost over, say, Paul Millsap if he's available as a buyout player?
Well, you'd have to first unload somebody. And so you're going to have to, in order to even have the buyout conversation, because I don't think that, I would rather get Paul Millsap. Paul Millsap can't really do much right now. But if the cost is free and you don't have to do all this work, then maybe it's worth exploring. I don't know. But you also have to have some pretty good intel if you're Miami, because we have a timeline thing here too. Because right now, if you were to add Paul Millsap, you couldn't do it until late March, right? Which now you're kind of, it defeats the purpose. Like by then, Markieff Morris might be back. So what's even the point of adding Paul Millsap? And also, you wouldn't be able to promote Caleb Martin at that point, and then Caleb Martin wouldn't be eligible for the playoffs, which is the whole reason why you want to promote him from that 2-way contract. So you've got to have really good intel on that Paul Millsap is going to sign with you at that point, or I should say that he's going to get bought out, and then he's going to sign with you, because before this trade deadline, you would have to clear cap space. You would have to trade Markieff Morris or KZ Okpala into Oklahoma City's cap space or whatever, and be very, very confident that you're getting somebody on the buyout market. Would I do it for Paul Millsap? No. But if I was super confident in a guy like Thaddeus Young, 100% I would do that.
Yeah. I wonder if he gets bought out at this point, considering how much they have played him of late, given all the injuries that they're going through.
There's been some scuttle that they could trade him and stuff, but I don't see anybody taking on that salary. We'll see what happens.
A couple of the other names that Greg mentioned in a tweet, Rui Hachimura of the Washington Wizards. We should also note that today, Bradley Beal electing to have season-ending surgery, and he'll be out for the rest of the year. The Washington Wizards, already a scrambling mess of a team and not likely to make any kind of noise in the playoffs. Now they're almost assuredly done. They're going to be probably sellers at the NBA trade deadline. I know they'd probably like to move Montrezl Harrell. I don't think that's going to happen either. I don't know if there's any takers for a guy like him or for that contract. But not at Hachimura. You're not a believer in what Hachimura brings to the table.
No, I love Hachimura. Washington does too. It's not going to happen.
You think the Wizards like Hachimura that much?
I mean, he's only making the rookie scale. What did he go? Sure. Hey, what do you guys want for? We've got KZ Okpala. Wizards are like, no, thank you. We'll hang on to Hachimura.
Markieff Morris played for the Wizards already, so maybe it's a reunion of sorts.
They're not doing that. It's a rebuilding team. The Hachimura thing is a pipe dream. It's one of those things where Pat Riley calls, hey, would you guys trade him to it? Not for anything you guys have. Call never for him. Thank you.
Right.
And Batum, same thing. The Clippers aren't trading Batum.
They're contenders. I mean, I think they still see themselves. Yeah, they made that trade for Norm Powell, and I think they probably expect Kawhi Leonard to make a return at some point soon, given all that.
And possibly Paul George.
Yeah. So if that's the case, they don't want to trade away one of their best players. Okay. So anyway, we'll move on. We'll talk a little bit about a potential trade brewing in Philadelphia to potentially acquire James Harden. That should be a big deal, and it will probably shake up the Eastern Conference if it does wind up taking place. We'll break it down here in the next segment. But first, just a reminder that this is the time of year that most people have probably given up on all their New Year's resolutions, but not this year. If you're willing to stick to your resolution to eat right, then make sure that you get Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because you'll enjoy eating them so much. Have you tried their puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are our first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. You're not a marshmallow guy, right? Or are you? I can't recall if you are.
I hate marshmallows.
Okay, that's what
But I like the Built marshmallow stuff that they've done. This is not the first marshmallow thing they've done.
Okay. They're
not as sweet.
Right. Yeah. And they're 100% covered in real chocolate, just like all their delicious bars. They're soft and easy to chew. They don't even taste like a protein bar. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these and you won't even notice the difference. They're better for you and they just taste great too. So go to built.com and look at all the different flavors they have. Build a mix box of each of your favorites. And then when you're ready to check out, use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off, but only if you go to built.com. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. Wes, this music has me feeling dangerous, let me tell you. Speaking of dangerous, a potential trade brewing. That's different. That's angry. That's not necessarily dangerous.
Oh, okay,
But,
that's different. All right.
subtle difference, but a significant one. Anyway, what do you think of the James Harden trade? Is that going to happen? Is that going to be? Well, let's break it down. Right now, of course, still a stalemate in Philadelphia. Right. Ben Simmons not playing. Daryl Morey saying publicly, you know what? I'll be willing to go into the offseason if that's what it takes. I don't see why. They're finding the player. Simmons is losing his opportunities to prove that he's still a valuable NBA player. Who knows what's happening with him? He's, of course, talked about having mental health issues, so we shouldn't dismiss those. But at the same time, we're also looking at Brooklyn and their current situation. And yes, they might even be lifting up their vaccination and mandate status in New York City. So who knows if Kyrie Irving might be able to play at some point this season in front of the Brooklyn home fans. At the same time, James Harden, a free agent who's already said he's going to choose to dip his toes into the free agency waters. And maybe he's just kind of sick of all the bullshit that he's dealing with in Brooklyn between KD's injury and Kyrie's, everything. And then, of course, James Harden, adding to that as well. And perhaps looking to get his kind of, get his own team or get a different team, change his scenery for himself as well. And of course, he gets along with Daryl Morey, the former Houston Rockets general manager, too. So a trade has been linked before. I think that's what Morey's grand prize would be in exchange for a Ben Simmons deal.
It's what he's been waiting for, right? I mean, this is why he's been so reluctant to trade Ben Simmons so far. And another interesting thing with the CJ McCollum deal, with him going to New Orleans. Look, that CJ McCollum stuff, it kind of cropped up again at the beginning of the year. Hey, just do it. CJ McCollum's better than what you got. That's off the table now. And it kind of looks like all of the options right now for Ben Simmons is off the table. You mentioned Bradley Beal getting season-ending surgery. Okay, Bradley Beal's off the table for Philadelphia and a potential deal for Ben Simmons if Beal were ever to be available. Damian Lillard, we have no idea what's going on with his stomach thing. It's a serious issue. That's not happening until at least the offseason, if it ever happens. And so all of these options that maybe were there prior, Sacramento just moved everything. And they were always sort of linked with Ben Simmons as sort of like, didn't Daryl Morey go on a local radio station in Philly? And it's like, yeah, if we want to do the Sacramento deal, that'll always be there. Well, guess what? 2 days before the deadline, it ain't there anymore, Daryl. So it's really interesting to see where this has kind of gotten to. It's sort of like Ben Simmons for James Harden or bust, right? For Philly. And if you're Brooklyn, all the reports indicate that they hate all of this and all of the noise. Look, it doesn't take a genius to part the leaks and the reports that you're seeing everywhere, from ESPN to The Athletic to anybody, Bleacher Report, everybody that's doing any reporting on this. It's pretty clear where the intel is coming from, and it's coming from the Simmons camp, and it was initially coming from the Harden camp. But all the stuff today on Tuesday while we're recording this, David, it feels like it's coming from the Simmons camp. Philadelphia is open to discussing all of this. Blah, blah, blah. Brooklyn's sort of been shutting it down more lately. It's kind of fun to read these reports and the sourced stuff and all this and kind of parse, why are they saying this? What are they doing here? Anything you read, look, nothing is off the table until the trade deadline is over. And even then, it's only off the table until the summer, right? But everything that you read doesn't mean what it says. It's bargaining. It's negotiation. It's trying to create a position, right? That's all any of this is. So I'll be really interested to see what happens here. If I had to bet, I'd say nothing gets done. Because again, if I'm Brooklyn, do I really want to help out Philadelphia? Do I really want to do that? Because right now we've got the player that's playing and they don't. And so push comes to shove, we lose Harden, big deal. At least we didn't help out Philadelphia and just gift him James Harden. At the same time, you could kind of squint and make the argument, if you're Brooklyn, are we better with Ben Simmons than we are with James Harden? Our defense is a mess. We could use sort of a pass-first guy like Ben Simmons. We could use an influx of youth. If Harden's going to walk away this summer anyway, would it be nice to get a guy who made the All-NBA team twice in-house under long-term contract and pair him up with Kevin Durant? Because we have no idea. Kyrie Irving could be playing on Mars next year with how many times he changes teams and where he wants to go. So I don't know. It's really interesting. But I ultimately think it doesn't happen only because Brooklyn has to do so much talking themselves into it. And they're already starting from a place of reluctance. So But again, like they have to be 100% confident that Harden is not going to resign. That's the only way it happens. And the only way that happens is if Harden basically tells that front office, hey, I'm not resigning.
Right. I don't know. I'm kind of starting to think something does happen. Like I know that Brooklyn Nets and Steve Nash recently said, "Oh, he's not going anywhere." But I just
that doesn't mean
I don't
anything.
know.
It's posturing. That's all it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're right about the fit there with Simmons, a guy who can pass the ball. We've already seen Kyrie play off ball playing next to James. You've got your go-to scorer with KD. I made this point on Locked On NBA yesterday. I don't even know what the mindset is. Like this team has such an irregular timeline. With any other team, you'd have to worry about the championship window and things of that sort. But I don't know if this team has that same approach, right?
Which team are we talking about now? Brooklyn?
Brooklyn. Yeah,
okay.
Brooklyn. Yeah, I don't. Do they have a championship window? Do they care? Given everything that's happened between Kyrie, like Harden certainly cares, and for him,
the window's now, isn't it? Like
for Harden, yes, but for Brooklyn, I don't know. I don't know if they see it as their current window. I don't know if they're willing to semi punt on
Kevin Durant didn't go there to win 3 years from now. If you ask Kevin Durant, who's sort of the ringleader of this whole thing, him and Kyrie, like the window's now. They want to win now, and Kyrie still thinks like they could win now. If you listen to these Kyrie interviews, like he's like, oh yeah, like eventually the universe will help me out, and like as if there's nothing he could do about this. But like yeah, eventually I'll be able to play, as if like not every other player in New York and Brooklyn are dealing with the same issues. But whatever. They think the window is now. The question is whether or not they think Ben Simmons can help them, because he also hasn't played in like a year. Like what kind of shape is he in? What kind of these mental health things that he's talking about, like the fear of shooting at the end of games, like that stuff doesn't just go. Or maybe it does. Maybe that's what he needs, is a change of scenery, and that's why he's been so reluctant to play for Philadelphia and face his teammates again and go into that locker room and face those fans again. I mean, that's quite possible that really all he needs is a change of scenery, and all of a sudden all that stuff is alleviated. I have no idea. I'm not his therapist, and I have no idea, and I don't want to speak to it. But they have to get some real intel on that, because you and I don't need to know it, but Brooklyn sure as hell has to know it before they pull off that kind of trade, because there's a lot at stake. Because if you trade James Harden, a guy who we were talking about potentially winning MVP last year for a point, remember that? Yeah. Like if you trade James Harden, that is an admission that, hey, this initial experiment did not work. Right. And you've got to be really confident that the next experiment will.
It could be a lot of noise too. I mean, it happened in Miami, right? They were this close to trading away Chris Bosh, according to all the outside rumors. Maybe internally, they just really say, you know what, we're going to double down. We're going to lean into it. This is really only the second season of this, trio of players being together. Last year, they were injury riddled. It was the first year where they were all on the same team at the same time after they acquired James Harden in the middle of the season. This year, they were all there, ostensibly, assuming that Kyrie Irving is going to be able to play in front of the home crowd at some point. So maybe they just lean into it and say, you know what, once we get KD back, we're going to be fine. Yes, they've lost 8 in a row, but I'm sure they'll be able to right the ship at some point. And by the way,
I mean, you're right. That's the other thing with Brooklyn too, is like, do you think it's broken, or do you think it's just broken right now? And like once Kevin Durant comes back, and then James Harden isn't asked to do everything, and maybe you get guys healthy, and maybe this thing does impact Kyrie Irving, and he is able to be a full-time player again. Like, I still think that version of the Nets is more dangerous than Durant, Kyrie, and Ben Simmons. As much as Ben Simmons can help that team, I still think if you've got 3 guys that could do that stuff, that's still a higher ceiling team than one with Ben Simmons instead of Harden. So that's like, again, I just think that the Nets have to talk themselves into it a little too much. But you know what? Anything can change. We're 48 hours away from this deadline, a little bit less. Like if they get that intel from Harden that he's not coming back, then they might not have a choice but to pull the trigger on a Ben Simmons deal.
Yeah.
If you're a Heat fan, you don't want it to happen, right? If you're a Heat fan, you want both teams to just stand pat.
I think so, because you all of a sudden, not only does Philadelphia not get the player that could potentially add something to this roster right now,
they would be the favorites, right? With Harden, if they got Harden.
Philadelphia,
yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Given that Embiid is playing the as well as he is as an MVP candidate, I mean, maybe not strong conviction behind that belief, but I think enough of it there to think that they could be some. Look, they won without him in and out of the lineup, with everything else going on there, with relying on Tobias Harris as much as they have without Ben Simmons. They've still been pretty damn good, and they've still built a pretty elite level defense. So, given all that, I think they're still a considerable threat, especially to Miami's.
Maybe that's the reason why Brooklyn doesn't do it, because I think if you were a rival team to Brooklyn and Philadelphia and this trade happens, you now become fearful of Philadelphia, not so much Brooklyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with you. If you're a Heat fan, you just want both of these teams to let the trade deadline go, and that's it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, 48 hours. We'll have it all covered here on Locked On Heat. Oh, no, by the way, just another reminder, the Brooklyn Nets are actually coming to Miami on Saturday to take on the Heat.
It's
That should
true.
be fun. We'll see what version of the team will be there at the FTX Arena, but of course, we'll have all the action for you. Make sure to check out Locked On Heat's trade deadline special on Thursday. We'll give you all the coverage that we possibly can about any potential moves that do take place or moves that did not take place and what it means about the Miami Heat's front office conviction about this particular team. But make sure to continue making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember that every episode is always free and available. So subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. You get all the best coverage available right away. Make sure to also check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. I'm David Ramil, signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, E.